I love this idea of this framework of Wesley's three simple rules. And as we think about being stewards of these resources, you could begin with the first rule, which is do no harm. And we begin the portfolio first by thinking about broad diversification. So wanting to invest the portfolio in a broadly diversified way. So owning stocks, both domestic and international, but also owning stocks of small and medium and large sized companies, but also owning a mix of bonds so that you have a balance of stocks and bonds, again, domestic and international, but to do it in a way that the holdings do no harm. So what we're able to do is to create portfolios that go through and take out the objectionable securities. And we've listed some of those: firearms or military weapons or private prisons or companies that are exploiting their labor or not promoting gender equity, any number of things. So the first thing that we do in building the portfolios is to do no harm, to take out those types of businesses that are involved in objectionable or controversial business practices. Beyond doing no harm, there's this idea of doing as much good as possible. If you think about the resources that have been entrusted to you, there's opportunities to invest those resources, deploy those resources in ways that affirm the good work in the world, whether it be environmental, social, or governance, but to own companies that are doing good things, that they're good stewards of the environment, that they have forward progressive social policies, and that they're good corporate citizens that have strong corporate governance. So in the portfolios, we're eliminating companies that would do harm, but we're trying to maximize the companies that are doing good social, that have good social policy, environmental, social, and governance policies. The way that we do this, the approach that we take is first through broad diversification. And again, we think about building a portfolio with fundamental building blocks. First, around stocks. So we want to own in the portfolios a broad mix of large, mid, and small size domestic and international companies, and own stock and to participate in the growth of those companies, but also to have a balance of bonds in the portfolios, both international and domestic bonds. And by different balances or mixes of these stocks and bonds, we're able to create more conservative investments or moderate, or investments that are more oriented to growth. And these portfolios that we build are called quantitative portfolios. We will take an index. Let's just say it's the large cap Russell 1000 index. And we want to own a basket of stocks that represent a broad market index, because we want the same return that's offered in the broad market, but we want to do it in a way that does no harm and does as much good as possible. So through a quantitative process, what we do is we begin with an index, and in this case, the Russell 1000. It's an index of 1,000 securities. And then we go through each of those securities and rank them based on their environmental, social, and governance scores. And we take out those securities that are objectionable, that are controversial, weapons, private prisons, and the like. But then we try to optimize those companies that are doing good in the world, maybe renewable energy, or maybe they are promoting gender equity in their workforce, or maybe they're promoting good corporate governance and policies. And to try to optimize the number of stocks that are good actors. And by doing this, by taking out the bad, optimizing the good, at the end of the process, we're left with about 150 different stocks in the portfolio. And we build the portfolio so that those 150 stocks will replicate the index, so that as stewards and fiduciaries, you can say, we're earning an index-based return, paying low fees for that, but we're earning that return in a way that we're not doing harm, and we're optimizing the good that we're doing in the world. And we do that for each of the different asset classes. So large company domestic stocks, mid company, small company domestic, and then international, both developed and emerging markets. And by creating these portfolios, then we have tools that we can build the model portfolios. But we'll talk a few minutes about how the foundation has earned those returns on behalf of their clients. And it's really on a focus, again, beyond just not doing harm, not owning objectionable or controversial businesses or companies, but really trying to focus on what the assets, how the assets as they're invested, how they have an impact in our world around environmental issues like climate change and clean technology, land use and biodiversity, how the assets are invested with a lens towards social policy, reducing conflict, creating more equality and opportunity and diversity in the workforce, and promoting human rights. And we can measure all of these things, but also having an eye towards governance, corporate issues, and transparency, and pay and contributions, and all of these things. We can measure all of these things. So for example, in the environment, whether it's a reduction of greenhouse emissions, so we can show you and measure that 60% of the holdings have a strong greenhouse reduction program versus 30% of the index, or that 16% of the holdings source at least 25% of their energy from renewable sources, a big difference from the index. As it relates to social measures, we can again measure social policy. We can measure supply chain standards and the quality of those supply chain standards of the companies that are held, and a significant difference of the portfolio relative just to a broad market index. The same with governance, being able to show differences in terms of board diversity and independence and political expenditures. So all of these things are measurable. So not only is the foundation delivering a very competitive financial return, but as stewards, you're able to see that the money is invested in ways that are mission aligned, that measure the good that it's doing in the world. So there's not only a financial return, but there's the amplification and the empowerment that also comes with the way the assets are invested. And the foundation is able then to allocate or to mix those portfolios in different balances so that there is a conservative, a moderate, and an aggressive portfolio, all using the same building blocks, but with different risk profiles. So it allows a church like yours to think about your assets and to think about how you want to use those assets in a time frame, and then to be able to allocate to different portfolios that would be appropriate for the use and the purpose of the assets.